Donald Trump, proving that when you've, quote, learned your lesson, you go and do it again.
We interrupt your regularly scheduled brainwashing in order to bring you news. Breaking news. A special segment of the almost daily Zcast, focused on curious, quirky, and quixotic news items that you may have missed during the last 48-hour news cycle. Hosted by me, the incorrigible Mr. Zeppo.
Good morning, Trumptopia. It's Monday, January 4th, 8:10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. And you probably didn't miss this headline in the last 48 hours. I should update the intro. I want to update all the intros, but that's neither here nor there. Our great orange spray-tanned president, who, by the way, is still $400 million in debt to undisclosed foreign agencies. Let that never be forgotten. Dear old Donald Trump seems to have been caught with his hand in the same cookie jar all over again. This time, an hour and some odd long tape of the, I'm sure he would have called it a perfect call had there been no actual tape. I mean, wasn't there a full-blown transcript and some audio tape from the first perfect call? I remember there was a transcript. I remember there was a whole nonsense shenanigan fiasco about hiding it on some ultra-secret deluxe server. Head on over to, I had the link here somewhere. Head on over to thewashingtonpost.com under their politics section. The link is washingtonpost.com/politics/Trump-Raffensperger. It's RAFFENSPERGER-call-Georgia-vote. That should get you there. There's a little more to the link. But just look up, type into your favorite search engine, Washington Post, Trump, call, Georgia. You'll find it. I will tell you folks, for the interests of full disclosure, I have not listened to the entire audio tape as of yet. This story broke yesterday, later in the day, and I had already signed off and resigned myself to focus on other things. And as of this morning, I checked in, and they've been, as is expected, releasing more and more segments of it. I have heard some of the deep cuts, as it were, some selections, some prime selections, some choice clips from this audio tape. And, well, it's grade A classic Trump con artistry on display. He, from what I've heard, he wavers and vacillates from begging to trying to be top dog, apex predator intimidation tactics and everything in between. And I would argue, although I'm sure his defenders are already bending over backwards to defend this tape, I would argue that he criminally interferes with the election process in Georgia with his request. Now, as you, I'm sure, are well aware, this is just the latest of an onslaught, a veritable cornucopia of Hail Mary passes. But this is the one that might really gum up the works for him. Because, if you set aside any potential shenanigans in Congress, and never mind that, just forget it, let's not even think about it. this phone call alone, it's a clearer, more tangible, more quickly discernible example of his mafioso-like pressure tactics, which are un-American at best and most charitable, and downright criminal in the most critical, perspective. Will this be the penultimate straw that breaks the Trump base's back? Or has QAnon, has the glorious prophet of QAnon already woven this into the very fabric of the storm is coming Trump mythology? I don't know. I kind of got burnt out on trying to monitor Q stuff. No offense. I don't want to offend anybody, you guys. I'm not out here to spew hate. But I am, sharing my critical thoughts about things and why I can't agree with them, right? And I can't agree with any of the content that I have been pointed to or shared at about Q. It's just like, this is insane. None of it adds up. And while logistically or intellectually, I can understand the hows and the whys as to, any random person getting caught up in that particular echo chamber. I can't imagine giving into that sort of cult of personality movement. It's just not my style. It's ironic that the people who scream most about freedom are the ones first in line to conform to the next crazy ideology. What's up with that? But I digress, friends. So this call is out. It is apparently not his first call to Georgia election officials and other, various from the last little bits I caught on the news as I was getting ready to do the show today. He's apparently, it can't be said that it was him. The White House phone number, the White House phone account has apparently been calling Georgia officials a lot. Apparently 18 calls to one office. The bottom line here is, folks, from my understanding, from what I heard of the tape, and I will go back and listen to all of it. I'm going to go back and read the details of the Electoral Act of 1887. Knock on wood. I will try. I hate to make promises and then not keep them. You'll know I didn't do it when I just don't bring it up again and I just keep plowing forward with some new stuff. And you'll forgive me. But no, I'm very interested. So it's on my list of things to do in the next 3-4 days. But my bottom line now, based on what I have heard, because I have heard considerably large chunks of it, and you can too, it's all over the news, and you can just go to the source, right? I haven't caught who may be responsible for the call, but it's not surprising that it's out, right? If I was a state election official and I was getting repeated calls from the president under these circumstances, and I finally took a call, and I'm in a state where you only need one side party consent to record calls. I believe that happens to be the case in Georgia. You're darn tootin' right I'd be tape recording that call. Because Trump is a known manipulator, liar, and scam artist. And the kind of person that likes to, use pressure tactics and then is two-faced about it. So, to finish my thought, bottom line is this should be the straw that breaks most Trump supporters back. Will it be? Who knows? They tolerated the Entertainment Tonight grab him by the pussy tape. Pardon my use of the word pussy, but that's a direct quote. And have since. That was like early days. I wanted to say like day one. It wasn't really day one, but it was early days. It was, pre-inauguration. At the beginning of this whole decades-long 4-year presidential term. And the base stuck with him, which is mind-blowing, right? If you think about it, had anyone else said that, had Clinton said that, had Obama said that, had either of the Bushes said that, they would not have a public career left of any kind. They would be, tucked away somewhere in ignominy. Donald Trump, he and his base are now, full steam ahead with the madness, trying to literally do that which they are accusing their opposition of having done. Which makes no sense. So many of the things that are supposed to be like mastermind evil plans, the accusation falls apart because there's no way that a true maniacal genius evil mastermind would have executed them that way, right? I was just thinking about this, kind of unrelated, but I want to just say it out now because I'll forget. But and forgive me, I've got a bit of a frog in my throat. One moment. Forgive me, folks. There's a whole cornucopia of claims that in one way or another, not all of which agree with each other, the coronavirus is a hoax. And while I can't deny that it's not impossible, like I can't say it's impossible. I'm not that naive. It's not impossible. It's within the realm of possibility. Curiously, though, to my mind, and I'm biased, I know, I'm opposed to Trump, but in my mind, the one way in which it makes the most sense that the accusation that the pandemic is a hoax, that like the one way you might be able to make an accusation in that direction that I can get behind is that the response to this disease, whatever it is, this virus, has been, hijacked and manipulated, and that is hoaxy. And that it might have been there to try and give Trump an opportunity to boost his public power. But then again, even that falls apart, because if it was a hoax to boost Trump somehow, to give him an easy adversary, right? To give him the opportunity to be a wartime president without starting a war, which would be unpopular with his base, you'd think they would have done things better. Because if you only look at Trump's response, it's as if his scam has been to con his base into denying and dismissing the virus in order to get as many people sick with the virus as possible. So the same thing, the same sort of like it falls apart if you really kind of sit with it, is Trump's own accusation of fraud, right? Like, why would the Democrats rig the national election but only impact the presidential count? It's all the same, like everybody's on the same ballot. They would have had to alter or manipulate, so why would they give wins to the other side? If the left were truly masterminding some in-depth, complex, nationwide scheme to steal control, why would they let Mitch McConnell win? Why would they leave Lindsey Graham in office? Right? Like, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. Why would Republican election officials certify the win in favor of Biden. You can't start accusing everybody that stands against Trump because they perceive him to be in violation of American norms and the Constitution itself, of being a deep state, treasonous, alien lizard person. It just doesn't, you can't, you end up accusing everybody, right? And if everybody else is wrong and only Trump is right, you might want to question that paradigm. If you're following a person who's deeply opposed by a vast plurality of everyone else, and that person's only response is to say, I alone am correct and true and right, and everybody else is an idiot and wrong, you might want to question the validity of that, because that's really unlikely. That's really, really unlikely, just from a purely statistical sense. The call that has just been reported, one could argue there's an issue of needing to validate the audio, et cetera, but every second of that clip, of those clips that I've heard with Trump's voice in it, sounds like Trump. And boy, does it sound like Trump. He sounds his most unhinged, his most criminally hubris, if I can make up a term. His hubris is so bold, it's criminal. And in the way he talks, you can tell that it's really, you can just tell that it's him, and that he's free balling it. And that it all makes sense in his head, but it kind of doesn't make sense if you're listening along. Sentences peter out and turn into other sentences that have got nothing to do with where he started, etc., right? These half phrases that seem to imply meaning but actually don't really make sense. But ultimately, taken all together, one cannot escape the impression of a mafia boss giving the vaguest and most subtle of implied direction that isn't so vague and isn't so subtle, right? It's cartoonish how bad he is at it, but it's clearly what he's trying to do. I'm going to give you an offer you can't refuse. Go do this thing for me, or else there's problems. And the worst and most absurd element of it is that it's all happening after the election. He literally has a handful of days left, right? 2 fistfuls of days left. And, we're almost at 15 days in the countdown. We're it's 16 or something, I think, 17. He was 18 not too long ago, 18 days. And other than whatever power he can muster or gather and harness from whatever remnants of a base he has when he is politely, I think, and hopefully peacefully escorted out of the White House by the Secret Service. Because no matter how charismatic, no matter how demanding of personal loyalty Trump may be, and no matter how caught up in that charisma, and no matter how willing to give their personal loyalty to him, his supporters and his base may be, I'm willing to speculate. I don't bet, but if I were, I'd be willing to put my money on the bet that the Secret Service kind of don't give a fuck, and that they're built around their job in that compartmentalized, industry way, military industrial complex kind of way, and that they're going to do their job. And I know that I often speak of the military industrial complex with the obvious implication that it's part of the problem, and So it may sound a little bit kooky that I'm turning to an element of that system, like to do the right thing. But for those of you who've been following along the show long enough, you'll have gathered that I don't have an absolutist judgment approach, right? I don't think any one human system is absolutely good or absolutely evil. I've talked about that at length in previous episodes, and I'm sure I'll talk about it at length in future episodes. And we've hit that vague window of time where I realize I've been rambling long enough and it's time to purge the palate with a bit of dancing electronic robots music from the virtual album End Times, your favorite animatronic and stoic DJ, the infamous DJ Zed, with... Oh, I played all of these before. Darn, he's played all of these before. Oop, Freudian slip. Coils Sprung Deep Dawn, a hybrid trap remix live music thingy-mahoo. You know, for all his wild claims and unfounded assertions and allegations that have gone nowhere, for all his shenanigans, Trump has also kind of subtly acknowledged or he's let it show in some of his commentary for a discerning ear, for a discerning audience, that he's quite well aware that he's full of malarkey and that on January 20th, the Biden-Harris administration will be the new administration. It wouldn't be the first time, right? Like he's always bundled in a kind of wink, wink, nudge, nudge into everything because he can't help himself. And this call, it's so egregious that it reminds me of a curious question. Is he trying to cause these problems for himself? I have described Donald Trump as a clusterfuck of failure from the earliest days of this podcast. Not because I'm full of rage and anger and I despise the man and I have to insult him. No, honestly. I really try to live like in the practice of not hating, right? Of trying to see humans, even flawed humans, even evil humans, even humans who do horrible, horrible things, as just not objectifying them and not giving into the self-destructive, self-undermining, self-defeating ego trap of hate. My comments are based on my observations of the things that he does, right? And as like just a critique of them in real world practical terms. I'm not entirely sure what his agenda is, and I'm as an observer constantly sort of speculating about things that might be going on. So I don't want to be accused of accusing him of things that are not true, right? I don't know. What is true is that he's in a lot of debt. He had alarming and bordering on criminal entanglements with questionable figures, ties to known corruption, and ultimately, despite all his hubbub, despite all his bluster, despite all his exaggerated claims, despite all his fact-checked and verified lies, despite all the things that he says that are kind of true, despite all the things that he does, he seems to go along with the interests, needs, and desires of the larger system. I could be wrong, but I don't think he's really trying to fight it. I've always suspected that. I've never been 100% sure. If he is trying to fight it, he's not very good at it. Let's say that, right? If he really is trying to fight for the little guys, and I made bunny ears in the air just then. If he's really, really trying to protect the rest of us from whatever the evil corruption is, he's doing a crap job. Let's admit it. Right? From Mexico not actually ever paying for the wall and the wall not really getting built, to Hillary Clinton never going to jail, to everything in between that he's talked about and only sort of half or 3/4 delivered on, if at all. He, like most other politicians that we gripe and complain about, has paid a lot of lip service to ideals that appeal to some of us and trigger some of the rest of us. And he's done his own thing And his own thing is his own game at, getting away with as much corruption while in office as he can. And he's also gone along with whatever the needs are of the system, in as much as that he's dropped more bombs and, bent over backwards for some of the larger, less often publicly debated and discussed objectives that we kind of go, it's too big. Let's stick to the most recent controversy, right? For those who might be unclear, forgive me. I know that my show is rather unstructured and it's just sort of me opining. It is a throwback to the oldie time of talk radio when people did just opine their opinion. And it is originally meant to be more of a discourse, a discussion, me and a couple of other people. But for context and clarity, theoretically speaking, and I want to make this clear, right? I don't know for a fact. I don't pretend to know things that I don't know. But based on observations and based on my understanding of the wide-ranging other theories out there, if I were to create my own theory, theoretically speaking, that which we might call the system of oppression manages electoral politics with a plausible deniability angle. They want it to appear as real and as meaningful as possible. That's why I don't think we're ever going to find any real significant and meaningful proof of nationwide, multi-state, systematic electoral fraud. Because the corruption, theoretically, I think, lies elsewhere. That they give us the election as an example of democracy working in order to keep as many of us engaged, right? There's a lot of people in this country that don't vote, and their main beef is that, voting is an illusion of control and it doesn't render any meaningful change. And there's some validity to that argument. I respect and understand that perspective. Am I full-blown all the way over there in that camp? Not necessarily. I think that voting can render meaningful civic organization and action. It just needs... The problem is that the system is corrupt. And why is the system corrupt? That's the question we really need to be asking. Of course systems get corrupted. This system, that system, it doesn't matter. Human systems are vulnerable to corruption because humans are vulnerable to corruption. Does that mean we need to burn everything to the ground? I think that would be a mistake. I think giving into that impulse would be giving the system what it wants. Anyways, I do ramble on about that quite a bit in many an episode, so I'll pause there. This tape, in the immediate context of the various current events that we're moving through, is likely to have, as some others have speculated and I agree with, a negative or adverse impact in Georgia on the turnout of the Republican base. I think. From the reporting I've come across, it seems like some of the GOP, politicians are worried about that. Now, I don't want to sound like I'm just blindly rejecting the question of the possibility of corruption in the election process, but because it's not impossible, right? As a matter of fact, anybody who's been listening along knows that I kind of take the nuanced position that it's sort of centrist and is not currently the most popular position, and that's that, yes, on a case-by-case basis, instances of fraudulent votes can be found. in an interesting case study, the Lieutenant Governor of Pennsylvania, John Fetterman, who's been fielding a lot of crap from the president and his core group of sycophant supporters in both chambers of Congress, has conducted his own investigation, right? He has defended his state against his allegations. I believe he is a Republican, although he might be a Democrat. I didn't. The last time I saw him on the news, I didn't double check and look at his name to see the little R. I could type his name right now. It's kind of irrelevant. He is a lieutenant governor. He is the elected official that is, that is in an appropriate position to be speaking on this and responding to the president, I think, amongst, a handful of officials that you can consider as such. From what I understand, and you'll forgive me if I'm mistaken, he's conducted his own investigation into voter fraud in Pennsylvania and apparently has uncovered a small handful of instances, all of which were votes cast fraudulently, get this, in favor of Trump. Now, I know that this sounds like I'm just repeating media talking points, but to the best of my understanding, these are the facts as they stand. Trump himself ordered an election fraud commission early on in the first half of his administration. Too much fanfare when launching it. They diligently investigated away for some amount of time and then had to be quietly disbarred and, kind of swept under the rug because they found nothing. Nothing larger than an occasional instance of some individual people committing election fraud, which were handled, right? Those ballots were, either taken care of, in some cases, I believe, were brought. But that happens, and no one's denying that. The accusation that the left is in denial will go around, I'm sure, just as it goes around the other way, too. And there are things that the left is in denial of. I'll let that be clear. Just as there are things that the right is in denial of. But when it comes to this issue of systemic, nationwide, leftist-leaning, blue corruption election fraud, that commission found nothing and was dismantled quietly to no fanfare. More recently, Trump's own Bill Barr, who up until that threshold, that line in the sand, was bending over backwards and doing all kinds of undermining manipulations of himself to appease Trump. He was doing all kinds of crazy things to bend over backwards on behalf of Trump. He suddenly grew a backbone and said, sorry, I've looked into it. My department's looked into it. There's no evidence of nationwide, systemic, democratically organized, blue D Democrat organized voter fraud. 50 plus lawsuits in various courts, ranging from, state courts, courts of appeal, various circuits, and 3 instances of cases attempting to get into the Supreme Court, all of which at all levels there was some involvement, a pretty large, plurality of these cases were decided on and commented on by Trump handpicked and appointed judges. Right? This is all established, understood, and talked about, well hashed over. And forgive me for sounding a bit like I'm just repeating, what they're saying. But these are verifiable. These things happened. The most recent of which is the Gomert case. Again, the Supreme Court said, nope, sorry, not going to go there. Not going to let you sue the vice president to force him to do something that he technically can't do. And now this call comes out. The problem with this call is that it's even more explicit than the last one. It's more obvious. And no matter what Trump himself believes, what the base believes, this issue alone, never mind I don't even know the number, but there's a relatively large number of other investigations, ongoing, developing cases against him, which have been keeping a relatively low profile, in part because in American justice, it's traditional to sort of like hush up during election year and just leave things alone. Let sleeping dogs lie. As we might recall, it was an issue that was brought up last election. But if nothing else pans out, this, I think, right, is a serious issue. And if he hadn't yet issued himself a self-pardon or pressured Pence into issuing him a pardon, he is now ever more likely to do so once the implications and the ramifications of this phone call going public, become clear to him. Interesting times, friends, interesting times. Will this move the needle on the Georgia election? I'm not sure. People, the media echo chamber of pontificators are all over the place on it. I think there's so much nonsense being flung around, and there's so many things that could sway the election that are at play that it's hard to tell. What I do know is that Democrats prepared for this in a way that the Republican Party, or rather the Trump Party, does not appear to have prepared for this. So arguably, and I could be wrong, like I said, I don't have some deep insight, I don't have some inside or insight, some inside knowledge or insight into anything, that anybody else doesn't. I'm just a plain old schmo with an opinion on what I see in the world. Well, anyways, here we are. I've been rambling quite enough. Stay tuned. As they say, keep an eye on this space. The next 3 days are going to be really interesting. Not just at the political level, but there's also this growing speculation of a potential, civil unrest. And we'll visit that and talk about that issue, and the sort of obvious and probably mildly unfair comparison and the comparing and contrasting of the civil unrest from earlier in the year to whatever the Trump base is imagining they're going to get away with. And all I got to say, friends, to close out this show is, as things move forward, I humbly entreat you all that believe in the power of prayer, that believe in the human connection to spirit, and that have hope for human society. That those of us out there that think there's a better way, we should all unite to sort of be that change we want to see in the world, speak it into existence. Excuse me. And share that energy. We don't need civic violence on the street, right? Why? And I understand that a lot of people are caught up with and sort of enamored with this idea of finally solving their grievances, their perceived grievances and perceived problems with what they believe or have been conditioned to think is wrong with this country. But it must be remembered, whoever they are, they profiteer on violence. Why give them what they want? I could be wrong, friends, but I believe there is more than one, hopefully, other way to to solve these problems that we have created for ourselves. But I'm going to wrap it up here, folks, and thank you from the bottom of my heart for tuning in to another special episode of the Almost Daily Zencast, the breaking news segment. This has been some wild news to see take its place in the landscape of way too much news every day. And I'm sure that in talking about this, there's 5 other things we aren't giving our attention to, right? And as always, folks, a humble reminder that no matter where you are, no matter what your context, there are countless folks out there that are probably in worse off situation than you are. So don't forget to be grateful for what you do have. And gratitude is a powerful spiritual tool, not just an emotion to feel and be, and not an emotion to ridicule or belittle. All right. I'll just stop rambling. As always, my deepest gratitude and humblest thanks. That was not very well conjugated. Until next time, folks, stay safe, stay human, and may peace, love, and grooviness blossom in your hearts.
Your regularly scheduled brainwashing in order to bring you...
Silly me, that was the intro. I meant to play this. The rough and tumble raw edges and corners of an amateur podcast show. It's either why you hate me or why you love me. Thanks for listening. Bye.
And that is the latest breaking news. We now return you to your regularly scheduled brainwashing. Thank you for listening.
Hail Mary passes. How many more does he got?